Hello guys, you must be wondering why I shoot these three pictures with different settings. It is because today's video is based on this. In other words, today we talk about that feature of photography that most of photographers don't use. And without creating more suspense, I will talk about exposure compensation. When you learn the basic of photography, this topic is never the part of conversation. We mostly talk about aperture, ISO, and shutter speed and never talk about it. In this video, we are going to look at what exposure compensation is, what it does, and how it can help. You will start wondering how you have managed to live without it so far. Let's watch. Before going further, first I want to thank so my all subscriber and welcome to the new those joined my channel and keep commenting and sending me feedback. Your every like and comment helping me to grow this channel. Those didn't subscribe yet, click on the subscribe button and click on the bell. So you will be notified when I will upload the new videos. When we photograph any subject or scene, our first aim is to get correct exposure. So we use the exposure triangle. Means a correct setting of aperture, shutter speed and ISO. And we make most of these. Everything works easily when we are using manual mode. But when we use automatic mode, then scene is different. When you use different camera modes, your camera changes things for you. This is true for aperture priority, shutter priority mode, program mode and other scene mode. A change in one settings automatically change the others and affect your camera's exposure. If you widen the aperture, the shutter speed will lengthen. If you shorten the shutter speed, the aperture will rise to compensate. Even we switch camera on auto ISO, then camera change ISO automatically and automatically create exposure triangle. These modes aim to keep the exposure correct. While allowing for creative changes, you rely on your camera's meter to read the scene correctly. Yet if we want to add or subtract light, there is not much you can do. This is where exposure compensation comes in. This setting or dial allows you to add or subtract up to 3 stops of the light in your scene. It does this without physically changing the shutter speed or aperture. In certain situations, your camera may not read the light correctly, or rather not in the way you want to. It will choose the wrong exposure setting. This in turn can over or underexpose the scene aggressively, while it searches to find that 18% mid-gray. The sky can be the challenges for your camera and so can very reflective surfaces. In short, your camera does not record a scene exactly as you want it. Every digital camera has a way of correcting this. Until the birth of mirrorless systems, DSLR cameras did not see the point of having an external dial. Nowadays, digital cameras such as Sony has an exposure compensation dial. This makes it easier to change. Otherwise, it is in your camera settings, changeable via the menu, and LCD screen for specific buttons. What you will see in the exposure value scale or EV for short. Here you will see a bar with a 0 in the middle, minus numbers to the left and plus to the right. If you need decrease the brightness, the value needs to go left. If you need to raise brightness, then the value needs to go right. Nice and simple. Minus for the darker shot, plus for the lighter shot. DSLR settings. Option 1. Press the button on your camera to open the setting panel. Navigate to the exposure value bar using the dial joystick and then use the gear wheel to raise or lower the exposure compensation. Option 2. Find the button that has the black and white icon of a plus and minus symbol. Hold this in while you move the dial. Right adds a positive exposure value and left a negative exposure value. Using the exposure compensation is easy and it works the same way on the dial as it does in camera. The plus sign brightens your scene and the minus sign darkens it. For example, if you are capturing a snow photography scene, you may find it is overexposed. Overexposure means too much light. So to even it out, you need to darken the scene. The dial on the exposure bar needs to move to a negative exposure value -1, -2 or -3 for extremes. The opposite works too if you find that the scene seems a little dark. Here you would brighten the scene by changing the exposure to a positive exposure value +1, +2 or +3. Exposure compensation works by changing one or more of the exposure value that make up the image. If you are using aperture priority, you set the aperture that you want. The camera will automatically set the shutter speed. If you are shooting using shutter priority, you choose the shutter speed. The aperture is what will change automatically by adjusting the exposure compensation. You override your camera settings. Here we will try to explain what happens when you adjust exposure using exposure compensation in aperture priority mode. Here we start with aperture 7.1 and shutter speed 50. To reduce the exposure by one stop, we need to move the exposure value from 0 to -1. This increases our shutter speed from 50 to 100 while the aperture stays the same. To increase the shutter by one stop, we need to move the exposure value from 0 to +1. This decreases our shutter speed from 50 to 25 while the aperture stays at 7.1. So you can understand how this feature helps us in auto modes. That's all for the today. Don't forget to subscribe and thanks for watching.